Good morning. My name is Mary Kate, and when I was younger, I grew up in church, and my parents served, so I was constantly in church, so I knew about God. But these old ladies at church would be like, "Hey, God speaks to me all the time. I just feel His presence all the time," and I didn't really understand that concept till about a few years ago, and I felt God speak to me in a powerful way of say, "Hey, there's a position that opened and I want you to take it." And I was like, what? Me? I'm not qualified. I'm too young. I'm uneducated. And this was a leadership position. And I just felt like I wasn't good for it at all. And so a lot of people were talking to me and they're like, "You're perfect for it. You should do it." And so finally, God woke me up out of a dead of sleep and said, "Look, you need to take this. You are going to regret it. This is going to be a turning point for you." And God's essentially yelling at me, like a passionate yelling. He wants me to do this. And so I said, okay, it's just an application anyway. And I go in for the interview, and God is giving me all the right answers. And I'm sitting there like, really, God? Really? And He kind of glares at me like a parent, like, yes, really. So I get offered this position, and I take it. And I'm just feeling God's presence through this whole position. I'm envisioning more, I'm planning more for the future and years ahead, that feeling like I'll still be in it. And then I get to this point, and a pandemic happens, and a bunch of things happen. I'm just feeling very stressed and overwhelmed. And I'm going between two options in my head of, do I push through? It's a rough season. Or I quit. And those were the words I thought in my head, quit. And I go through this for about a month. I don't tell anybody, I just feel it. And then God says, it's time for you to step down. Part of me is so relieved. And the other part of me is sad, disappointed. I feel like a failure. I feel like God looked at me like the front of this RiverLake church building and said, look how pretty and amazing and inviting it is. It has so much potential. And then it's like somehow through that year, He sees that dent. I feel like this dent. I felt like I was the dent in leadership for the church, that I was bringing it down. I felt like a failure. I felt unworthy of what God had for me. I never lost trust or faith in God. I lost trust and faith in myself. And it was a whole process of, I didn't feel worthy enough to continue coaching meetings. I didn't feel worthy of God. I felt so unworthy. I couldn't even go to a church, a place where I should have felt like I could go and not be judged. I didn't go to church for months. And then I finally went to church again for a couple weeks. And it was through a sermon and God talking to me saying, hey, you are not a failure. This was only a phase. This is only a step on your path. This was to prep you for more. I have way more. You're so worthy. I trusted you and have faith in that. And then your time was over. And that's okay. And I'm learning to fight again, to believe in myself, to be worthy. And I learned from that journey within the couple years that I had of God's path is not a highway like I like to think of it. And I like to think of it as a highway. It's got hills and curves and there's exit you can go on and off of. Now, it may start on the highway. God's path is very unconventional, but it can start on the highway and then go on a roller coaster that goes up and goes into a cliff, into a volcano, into underwater, and then back on the highway. Because when He's doing that unconventional path that seems crazy and whirlwind, He's prepping you to be the best person you can be, to be the best Christian for you. Because you may feel unworthy at times for God's plans, but at the end of the day, He made that plan specifically for you. He chose you. He's made you worthy. So next time you feel like God has brought you a plan and you're like, I'm that dent in the church building, you're not. Because He has His trust and faith in you. So you should have trust and faith in yourself and in Him, because you are worthy.